Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire. And when I'm not interviewing inspiring entrepreneurs, I'm listening to Stephanie O'Brien on the Moved by Purpose podcast.
When we're searching for our life's work, we can be really intentional about the jobs and opportunities that we step into, not just to basically bide our time or make ends meet, but to in some way train us for the work that we want to do someday.
Are you longing to know what your purpose is? Are you on the wrong career path? Do you feel like there must be more to life? Don't worry, there's hope. It's time to be moved by purpose. Now your host, Stephanie O'Brien.
Hey, it is Stephanie O'Brien with the Move by Purpose podcast, and today's guest is someone that I am very excited to have and very honored to have him on the show. And we are talking about his new book, The Art of Work. The path to your life's work is both difficult and mysterious, which is why few find it. His book, The Art of Work, is a book about discovering your true calling, that thing you were born to do. Through personal experience, compelling stories, and current research in the mysteries of motivation and talent, Jeff Goins shows you how to find work that matters. So without further delay, let's welcome him to the show. Welcome to the show, Jeff. I am so thrilled to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. It's great to be with you.
So, the first question I usually ask most of my guests is for you to give a background about your work history and what led you to starting your business and to where and what you're doing today.
Yeah, those are a lot of questions. Sorry. So my background is sort of an eclectic background. I grew up in Illinois and now live in Tennessee. And I grew up near Chicago, and I was the first person in my immediate family to go to and graduate from college. And then also in the extended family, one of the first people to do that as well. So I knew that going to college was a good thing, but once I got there, I didn't actually know what to do. And I don't think I'm alone in that ignorance. And so I did the practical thing. I went to a liberal arts school and got a double major in Spanish and religion, and then proceeded to graduate and go, well, what am I supposed to do? And so naturally, as I'm sure you would imagine, I joined a band. Again, that's just sort of the next natural progression from those fields of study. And I toured with a band for a year, and then I got down to Nashville, really to chase a girl. Ended up marrying her, and so that worked out, and worked in a call center for a little while. Then got this gig working for a nonprofit, and I really didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't really know much about nonprofit work, and I knew even less about marketing, so it made sense that I would then become a copywriter. And I worked alongside the executive director, basically helping him grow the organization. They didn't have a formal marketing team, didn't really have much of a budget, and so I became a student of online marketing and really anything that didn't cost any money, any sort of grassroots marketing strategy that we could implement, we would try. And I remember getting a Facebook group 7 years ago, probably, and using that as a way to reach out to people and just trying innovative things. I followed a lot of Seth Godin, began reading Copy Blogger, and started to learn about online marketing from experts who were doing it in a more ethical, transparent way, which reflected the values of our organization. And I did that for 7 years, learned a ton about not only marketing, but about business. My boss had his MBA, and so he was constantly throwing business books at me. And I was like, why are you doing this? Like, this is just a nonprofit. But as anybody who's worked in the field knows, that running a nonprofit is running a business, and you do have to know a lot about management and marketing and finance. So I got this great education from somebody who had been doing it for 25 years, and not really knowing that this was preparing me to go out and chase my own dream of being a full-time writer and learning how to build a business around that passion so that it could be sustained. So 3 years ago, I went to that same boss, told him that I thought it was time to move on from what I was doing, and kind of thought he'd be disappointed. And in fact, the opposite was true. He was really, really proud and gave me his blessing, and quit my job and kind of went out to do what I'm doing now, which is writing books and helping writers and creative entrepreneurs succeed online. So those are kind of the two different things that I do: write books and then help other people get their message heard. And I think all of it, I mean, while I was in the middle of doing all that stuff, it felt like, what is all of this for? It felt like I was just trying to figure life out, as most of us are doing. You take a job just to kind of make ends meet. But what I learned, and all of this was an apprenticeship. It was preparation for what was to come.
Yes. Okay. So you said apprenticeship, and I love that. And you said so many valuable points, just letting us get to know you better. And a lot of people feel like they want something more, and they can kind of feel a little discontent with where they are. But there's so much value in skill sets they're learning and developing that will really help them build a dream or pursue their dream. And you mentioned apprenticeships as a key part of finding your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So does it really apply today, and how is an apprenticeship such a plausible solution to unemployment?
Yeah, so I mean, this is sort of a dead word. I think people don't talk about apprenticeship. This is this term that we read about in history books, or, I'm reading a book about the Renaissance artist Michelangelo. He had an apprenticeship working under another famous artist in Florence. And then kind of when he became established, he had a young artist in training apprentice under him. And it does sort of seem like an old-fashioned idea, but I think the idea of apprenticeship has never been more relevant. And so if you're unfamiliar with that term, basically that just means that instead of like getting a typical internship or part-time job, or like basically you're fetching donuts for the boss, I mean, this is sort of like the best that we have to offer in traditional career training. Once you graduate from college, or when you're in the middle of your education, the best hands-on training that you can get is basically taking everybody's lunch order. And an apprenticeship is different in the sense that it takes a lot of time. It doesn't last a summer. Traditionally apprenticeships lasted years. And you are doing the work. I mean, you are doing it right alongside the master craftsman or craftswoman, the person who knows how to do it. And so I was doing some interesting research when I was writing this book, my new book, The Art of Work. And I was reading about apprenticeship from the Middle Ages and from the Renaissance. And then I was studying other countries in the world that have lower unemployment rates. And one of those countries is Germany. In fact, Germany has one of, if not the lowest unemployment rate in Western Europe. And the reason for it is they have what's called a dual system. And basically that means that while you're going to school, studying a trade, you can also enroll in an apprenticeship with one of the big companies in town and get school credit, but also get paid a fraction of what a professional would get paid of their salary. And what's interesting about this dual system, so while you're going to school, you're working in the job that you're basically studying to do. 90% of the students who enroll in this end up completing the apprenticeship, and over 50% actually get hired by these companies.
Wow.
And I think that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
I could go back to my college class of people who took summer internships or their first job out of college, and I'm pretty sure that not half of them, I would say probably not even 10% of them,
it's very low,
actually ended up doing that thing that they were studying to do. So there's something about that, I think, about the lost art of apprenticeship and how you can invest yourself in a process that is really training you practically for work that you're going to do, as opposed to just taking a job or being somebody's lackey. And I mean, it's challenging to set something like that up, but I think when we're searching for our life's work, we can be really intentional about the jobs and opportunities that we step into, not just to basically bide our time or make ends meet, but to in some way train us for the work that we want to do someday.
Yes, I agree. And I started maybe not doing the full blown, like where you're under years of study, but as soon as you start getting clear on what it is that you want, you might not have the skill set that you need in order to really succeed in it. And so I started seeking out people and asking them, can I either work for you, or can I shadow you, or just learn from you? And like I would offer to do very either free work or lower paid work just to learn, to build up my skill set. So I think that you're definitely making a very good point with the value of really just learning from somebody.
Yeah, I agree. I love that you're doing that, Stephanie.
So I want to transition to the next question, and I absolutely love this question, and it's regarding failure and success, and how does failure lead us to success?
So in the book, I sort of reframe failure as a necessary step to get to success. And so I think typically we think of failure as this thing that stops you dead in your tracks. But if you study the biographies of influential people, I'm talking about people who have made their mark on history, people like Walt Disney or Steve Jobs or even Mother Teresa, all of them had these pivot points. They had these moments where they ran into failure or ended up encountering something that felt like a setback, or they just kind of changed their mind about what they wanted to do in life. And instead of giving up or just kind of sticking with the status quo, they did something that I think all smart people do, especially smart entrepreneurs, is they pivoted, which is to say that they just kind of, if you think about this in the game of basketball, when you're dribbling a ball down the court, once you stop, you only have a few steps before you have to pass the ball or shoot. And so you basically run out of options, right? Otherwise, you're going to get called for traveling and you're going to turn the ball over to the other team and you're going to lose, right? You know, at least for that moment. Well, right before you give the ball over to the other team, right before you travel, right before you basically reach the point of no turn, you have an option. You can pivot. You can leave one foot planted and you can basically turn in any direction and pass the or shoot. So I remember in middle school when I didn't know much about basketball and I was playing with my friends and one of them sort of stopped and he kept one foot planted and he started pivoting, sort of turning around, trying to get away from me because I was trying to get the ball away from him. I thought he was cheating. I thought he was traveling because his foot was moving all over the place, but he had one foot planted, so he wasn't actually traveling. He was just pivoting. And I think that in that move, there's a secret for those of us who are in a job that we don't like, or we've encountered so much failure that we wonder if we're ever going to be good at anything, that at the point of seemingly no return, you always have an opportunity to pivot. And I love the story of Groupon, where they started as this nonprofit organization, and they basically use the power of social media. They tried to use the power of social media to bring people together to go do some sort of charitable act of service on a weekend. And it didn't work. I mean, it's this great idea with all the best intentions in mind, and it did not work. And so what Groupon did when they had lost $1 million and were basically on the verge of bankruptcy, long before they were called Groupon, they were called The Point, backed by this venture capital. And they made a pivot. They made a small little pivot and they said, okay, instead of giving stuff away and doing service work and getting people involved in that, and if we reach a certain number of people who want to volunteer, we'll do it. What if we had everybody say, okay, we're going to pay $20 for a pair of shoes that would normally cost $50. And if we get 100 people to agree to do it, we'll get somebody who sells shoes to offer a limited discount for that many people. And as we know, it worked like a charm, and they were a multi-billion-dollar IPO years later. I mean, that's very different. You're in the hole $1 million, and then you're going public for many multiples of billions of dollars. And the difference between total failure and that success was really just a tweak in the business model. It was just a pivot. And so when we're facing failure, when we feel like failures, yeah, I think we should listen to that. But often in that failure, you're only just like one or two small moves away from success. And I think that that's encouraging to remember.
Before we continue, let's stop for this quick break. Want to know the secret behind the people that have built successful 6-figure and 7-figure businesses? I know I sure was wondering what that was. Of all the entrepreneurs I have interviewed, all of them have invested in their training and in the success of other people. So what is the fastest way to grow your business? You probably guessed it right if you've been paying any attention to any of the leading experts out there, and that is by joining a mastermind group. The best mastermind groups require a financial investment. This ensures the commitment of every member in the group. The free ones just do not have the commitment from the members. They have inconsistent attendance, which ends up being a waste of everyone's time. If you want to rapidly grow your business, it just won't happen if you do not invest any money. I hate to break it to you, but the businesses that grow the fastest are due to the fact that people have invested in their own personal and business development. They have invested in a mastermind group, hired coaches, paid for trainings, marketing, a supportive team to delegate and offload the responsibilities. It is a fact that you cannot build your business alone without the feedback, input, and idea sharing or brainstorming of other business-minded people. You will not see the success you are hoping to see anytime soon. Who is looking at your sales copy, your website, marketing flyers? If it's a friend or a family member, do they own their own businesses? Who is helping you process through and solidify networking strategies and rocking that sales process? What about the pricing on your packages? I cover all of these business boosting techniques and strategies in my mastermind group. So join my mastermind group to learn all the strategies, secrets, resources, and share ideas that will get you transitioned out of your day job in a year. This group is for people who are already clear on their business idea and are hustling to make things happen. This group will just speed up the success and boost your profits. At a bargain price of $250 a month, you will not find any other mastermind group out there like this that has the amount of training and coaching made available to you. Think you can't afford that? Trust me, you really cannot afford not to. Home study programs, books, and consuming free podcasts and blogs will only get you so far. Building your business with a group of committed members is the missing key to your business success. Don't delay. Register today and get a $50 off per month bonus. It is very encouraging because, as you know, it's not, as much as we all would love it to be this clear, straight, easy path with no obstacles or resistance, that's just not how it is.
No. I mean, it's going to be marked with failure, and I'm sure you could speak to this, Stephanie. And I think failure is the best friend you'll ever have because it teaches you what you shouldn't be doing, but also gives you clues as to what you should be doing.
Yes. And failure is one of my greatest teachers. Totally. And so I appreciate it. And yeah, I don't think you can't have success without many failures in there.
I agree.
So your book, you write about the 10,000 hour rule. And I've heard this too. And I'm really interested to hear your take. You say society says that if you do something for 10,000 hours, you will become good at it. But you say that is simply not true. So could you debunk that myth for us?
Sure. Well, so I think a lot of people have heard of the 10,000 hour rule, which was a term that I believe Malcolm Gladwell first coined in his book Outliers. And he actually does justice to the idea. We just kind of have oversimplified it. But in that book, he quotes a study by a team of researchers headed up by a guy named K. Anders Ericsson, where basically they realized that 10,000 hours in the study that they did with musicians and world-class performers, one of the common denominators was that they had accumulated 10,000 hours of practice. And I think that there are two things that we need to understand about the 10,000 hour rule. One is it's a description, not a prescription, meaning you could look at world-class athletes and look at their diets or something and, they all eat hamburgers. Therefore, if you eat enough hamburgers, you're going to become a world-class athlete. That's not necessarily true, right? Like that could just be a description of one of the things that they do, but just because you take that and apply it to yourself doesn't mean that you're going to have that success. And in addition to that, there's been all of these interesting studies recently that have come out that basically said it varies depending on the field. It could be 3,000 or 4,000 hours worth of practice can get you to world class, or it could be 15 or 20. It just kind of depends. There's a great book called The Sports Gene that addresses that a little bit. But the second and more important fact is that in this study of deliberate practice, which is where the 10,000 hour rule comes from, it's not so much that you put in a certain number of hours of practice, it's the kind of practice that you're doing. And I describe this process as painful practice because that's really what it is. I mean, anybody who's written about this with any sense of good research behind it describes the practice as basically being this process of you have to do the activity to the point of utter exhaustion, and you have to do it again and again and again, day after day after day. It's sort of like if you're in the gym, like think of like maxing out with like a, barbell or something. You have to do this to the point that you can't do it anymore, and then you have to repeat it again and again and again in the right context over the right duration of time to the point that you get to excellence. And so most people who are trying to chase their dream don't realize the kind of work that they're going to have to put in. It's not just the amount of hours. It's not just getting up early or staying up late and working on your side hustle or trying to build a business. It's really about intense practice, really intense focused effort over a certain period of time that will get you the kind of results that you want. And it needs to hurt. It needs to be hard. And I argue that if it's the right activity, the thing that I would consider your true vocation, your calling, even when it hurts and it's hard and it's painful and you don't want to keep doing it and you're exhausted, there's a certain amount of pleasure that you get from that, where you love it. I mean, writing is that way for me. It's difficult and it's grueling and I don't want to do it. It's not necessarily motivating. But when I'm in the middle of doing it, not even at the end, but when I'm in the middle of doing it, I realize this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I think practice is not only a recipe for getting great at what you do, it's also the best means by which we can discern what we're supposed to be doing and what we're not supposed to be doing.
Yes, and I love this. I'm writing my first book very similar to this, and I just wrote a little chapter that's honing in on the points that you're making here as well. You can, at least for me in the beginning, I was running around and hustling and working very, very hard, but I was chasing distractions. So you said focused effort. Yeah. And I realized I wore myself down and I got so discouraged and so worn out, so exhausted because I'm like, how in the world can I be working so hard and not have even gotten farther? Because I would focus on a task and then chase a pretty shiny object and keep chasing those and rabbit trail. And instead of being that intense amount of focus, and it takes a lot of discipline to not chase after all of these distractions.
Yeah. What's interesting, Stephanie, is when I was building my business, I was doing it for an hour or two every morning and evening for about 2 years. And during that time, I did not have time to screw around on Facebook or Twitter or even mess around with irrelevant emails. I was writing, I was blogging, I was connecting with the right people that could help my message spread. And I was just really focused on the task at hand. And the things that I were doing were without a doubt the things that I thought were going to move the needle. And I was on a deadline. Towards the end of that process, I had my wife and I got pregnant. I had 9 months to replace her income so that she could stay home and be a mom, which was something that she had always dreamed of doing that we quite frankly couldn't afford to do without her continuing to work. And so I was very intent on replacing her income. So I didn't care about anything that wasn't going to affect that bottom line. And at the end of that year, really over the course of those 9 months, I ended up replacing her income, then I replaced my income, then I doubled both of our incomes. And that was the moment at which I realized, wow, I could do this. I thought I was just replacing my wife's income, but I just kind of built a business. And what's funny is I quit my job. I felt like I had made it and I would have all this time. I would have, 7 or 8 hours a day if I wanted to do this thing that I used to be spending an hour or two. And I was actually less productive and accomplished less in the first 3 months of going out on my own because I wasn't as disciplined as I was before. And I was, as you mentioned, chasing all these shiny objects and doing all these things that weren't essential. And I had to kind of go back to the basics and realize, okay, this is what practice looks like. This is what getting good looks like. Intentional, focused effort where you're really pushing yourself, even if it's over a short amount of time, is better than just kind of long, drawn out, just punching a clock, putting the hours in. And I would argue that it's better to do something with intensity for an hour than it is to do it just sort of haphazardly for, 8 or 9 hours. And, that kind of depends on the task. But I think if you're really trying to make something happen, it needs an incredible burst of energy and effort and focus in order for you to increase your skill and move the needle with, the kind of results that you're trying to accomplish.
Yes, I agree. And I'm glad that you had the same thing. The same way when I transitioned out of my full-time job to work on the business full-time, I was like, how in the world did I get way more done when I had a full-time job than now I have all of this extra time and things are not getting done.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, it's
common thing.
It's easy to fill your day with stuff that isn't essential. But if you only have an hour or two, and you're hustling on your lunch break or getting up early at 5 a.m. or something to work on this project that you're hoping will spell freedom for you, then it forces you to really think about the things that are essential. And I think the people who end up doing great work have the discipline to do that all the time.
Yes. One that I'm still working on developing, but yeah, it's that intent. You just don't have time to even really acknowledge those distractions. You know what you need and you go after it. And all these other things, you're just like, nope, that's not going to get me to where I need to go. So, and to find that discipline and motivation to do that when you have a little bit more margin. It's a work in progress. Totally. Okay, so the next question is about the next generation. And why will the next generation have to be more entrepreneurial and flexible than ever before?
So in the book, I talk about this idea that I borrowed from an old business book that I read about a year ago. And the term is a portfolio life. And I borrowed it from a guy named Charles Handy, who wrote a book called The Age of Unreason. And this book was a business book. He's a British guy, and it was published in 1989. And the book is basically predicting the future of organizations. And one of the predictions that Handy makes is that in the future, organizations will be smaller, and the freelance community, what he calls portfolio people, will be larger, meaning that you won't have one 40-year career that you do for the rest of your life and then retire and get your pension. In fact, you'll have a bunch of mini careers, a bunch of little gigs that you kind of cobble together, and that'll be the way that you make a living and make a life. And he actually argues this is how humans are wired. They're not wired to do one thing. They're wired to do a bunch of different things that all fit together. And he describes, there are 5 different types of work, and we need to be doing all of these types of work in order to be fulfilled in the contributions that we're making. So what's interesting about that is this book came out in 1989, and then recently Forbes published a study that predicted if trends continue, employment trends continue, that by the year 2030, over half of the working force will be freelance. It'll be entrepreneurial. It'll be people who don't have one full-time employment deal. They've got a bunch of gigs that they do. They'll be freelancers, entrepreneurs, however you want to think of it. They're going to have to be in charge of their own income streams, and they'll have to learn how to manage a variety of them. So what's fun about it for people like you and me is, I'm sure a lot of people who listen to your show, is they're ahead of the curve. They're already thinking about these things. But in our lifetime, in the next decade, 10 to 15 years, it's not going to be a choice for people. For most people, it's going to be something that's thrust upon them. And the good news is that of all of these opportunities, there's never been a better opportunity for someone to kind of bootstrap a business, figure it out, and start working for themselves. The bad news is that if you're not prepared for it, I think it's going to jar a lot of people. But I do think, as Handy says, that this is the way we're wired. We're not wired to do one thing. We're wired to do a bunch of different things. And so the fact that I'm an author and a speaker and also an online entrepreneur, all of these things kind of fit together in a way that fulfills me, in a way that working at one job, as good as it was, I really enjoyed my job at the nonprofit for 7 years. It didn't fulfill me in the same way, because I think we're wired to do lots of different things.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's part of my passion and mission, really, is I want to get to this generation or the coming generation, those that are preparing for college and for their careers, to really learn, how do you market? How do you sell? How do you manage multiple gigs and things? Because that is the way that the working world will be. So I love that you are sharing that in your book and kind of preparing the people to start adjusting so they can be ahead. So we're aligned with that, and I'm grateful that you shared that. So it has been a true honor to have you on today, and I am looking so forward to seeing the huge success I know that The Art of Work will be. And I know writing is definitely not easy, and I just thank you for continuing to write and guide us writers and authors with how to get it done.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. It was a pleasure, and thank you for your show. It's generous, and it's helping a lot of people, and I was honored to be a part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Most people who are trying to chase their dream don't realize the kind of work that they're going to have to put in. It's not just the amount of hours. It's not just getting up early or staying up late and working on your side hustle or trying to build a business. It's really about intense practice, really intense, focused effort over a certain period of time that will get you the kind of results that you want. And it needs to hurt. It needs to be hard.
There you have it. That was the extremely talented, generous, and gifted writer, Jeff Goins. And to connect with him, be sure to check out goinswriter.com. That's GOINS writer.com. You can order his book on Amazon, The Art of Work. Make sure you check out that book. It is filled with tons of value and information and inspiration. And for those still learning what your calling is, trying to learn what you are basically meant to do in this world, I highly recommend this book. It is a must read. So again, check out goinswriter.com to connect with him and thank him for his work and his time on the show today.